All right. Well, thank you, Thank you, Renee. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting. I want to just first of all thank all of you for participating and volunteering to sit on this committee, either as again or as new members. We did a lot of work, I think, to get to this point. And as I've said in the past, I think, and it was a lot of work and a lot of tough discussions, but I think we almost did the easy part, which was getting to the, our preamble of what this meeting was all about and what this was going to do. And so, the hard work's still ahead of us in how we implement REI as an organization as we go forward. And again, I just want to thank everybody for stepping up to the plate, because this isn't easy and these are tough discussions and an uncomfortable one sometimes, but one that we do need to have and should have, and we will have. And so I just, what I wanted to do is start off with just tell, for all of you that don't know me that well, Michael Saragosa. I'm the mayor this year in Placerville. I've been on the city council since 2018. I was appointed. We had a vacancy, and then I came on board. I grew up in Los Angeles, so in a very, very, very diverse community. Placerville is a little bit different. We're about 75% Caucasian, 20% Latino, and then about 5%, I would say, other, with API, African American, et cetera, Native American. And and it's funny because 150 years ago, Placerville was one of the most diverse cities in the area. We had Chinese immigrants, we had Black farmers, we had Latino miners, we had Native Americans, and it was the gold rush. And for me, I'd love to see that type of diversity again within the city of Placerville. And I think, for those of us that come from rural communities, I think, as we look, as we sit on SACOG and as we work at this organization, and we look at regionalism, and as our former chair said, we sort of park our individual hats, because we look at this from a regional perspective. And that's how I see opportunity here with this committee, as well as that, we want that same diversity throughout California. And I think there's opportunities, what you'll hear from me and Darren and others and Carm that know, that have worked with me and know me. It's, I'm big on home ownership and being able to push that. I think that is a key factor for people of color to have to build generational wealth and to move into a more middle class and beyond as we go forward. And reality is we have a lot more affordable housing in rural areas as well. And I think there's opportunities. And as we build out our transit and we look for ways to regionalize our transportation system in more effective and efficient ways, there's going to be those opportunities. And so I look at it as a great opportunity, not as a way that's going to detract from my area, but really as a way to promote and to bring new values and cultures and to bring folks together. And I just think it's a great opportunity. I saw just yesterday, I believe the governor and Assemblyman McCarty and others are talking about the old EDD building and transforming a lot of those into housing. And that's fantastic. We're going to have potentially thousands of units downtown, over the next several years that will allow for, low income, moderate income, and those things to happen. And that is good. We need it. We have to have it. But at the same time, when I look at those, is how many of those are home ownerships? How many of those people are going to be able to own any of those things? And it's probably not going to be. It's going to be, a developer or somebody else. And so I just I want us to think about that as we go forward, and just to think about that home ownership aspect of it as well, and those opportunities. Because as much as I love affordable housing, I want affordable housing that people can say that they have owned. And so I want to move towards that as we talk to REI. And again, and thank you, James. This is a refresher for those that either have been on it, and then for our new members as well. And just to kind of give that background, a couple of things that I wanted to, so that's my preamble. I just wanted to give a little bit of my, my thoughts are on this and get to know me a little bit better. But we want to continue to work with our stakeholders, Some of the things that we went through last time was really to look at race, ethnicity, look at income, look at geography, rural and urban, how that affects. Look at tangible action items that we want to achieve. What are the tangible items that we want to achieve for today's session? And I think one of the things I want to do right off the bat is I gave a little bit about myself, but for everyone else, I thought it'd be good to give a little bit of background about yourself, about your jurisdiction. And I know we don't have a lot of time, and I probably monopolized a few minutes here already, but I will go ahead and I would love to open this up to everybody else. So I will probably ask for some help here, but from the top of my screen here, Carm, I see you first. So if you want to go first, and then we'll go down the line.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carm Baines, Sutter County Supervisor, born and raised here in Yuba City, fourth generation farmer here in Sutter County in the North State. My family and I, we grow peaches, prunes, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, and rice. We also have a diversified land development portfolio here in the city of Yuba City. Just really feel honored and to be a part of such an amazing organization. Being a board member on SACOG is that's a pretty big deal for me, and I appreciate the staff and everything that you all do. But to see the funds come back to your community is very, very rewarding, and also seeing them come to our neighboring communities. So great to be a part of the team. I just seen our immediate past chair just joined here, Chair Jennings. But again, just great to be a part of the team. Glad to be here, and welcome to the new folks.
All right, thank you, Carm. And I'm going to go then and to our chair of this committee, to Rick, and our fearless leader here, who does a much better job. So I'm going to hand the reins back over to Rick since he's able to join us. And thank you, Rick, for being with us. So I'll go to you next.
So Michael, I was listening to your preamble, as you called it, and I thought you did an excellent job. And I'm not going to be able to stay on the whole call, so you're going to have to carry the ball today, because I'm not going to be able to do so. But I just want to kind of welcome all of those who have been a part of this in the last 2 years, last 3 years, whatever time frame that you've been a part of it. And also I want to welcome the new members who are going to be stepping up to the challenge of making sure that race, equity, and inclusion is something that SACOG can be a leader in this region, and others can follow behind our work. And so I'm just really happy to have this great team that we have in front of us. Those who have done it before, those who are new, working together, we're going to achieve some great things. We have an action plan that we were able to put together. So we've got our marching orders as to how we're going to move forward, but it's only going to happen if we work together in order to make sure it happens. And I can guarantee you it's going to benefit this region for years and decades to come. So I'm just happy to be here for the time I can't stay. I wanted to see all of you and meet all of you, but we'll have more time to do that in the future.
All right, thank you, Rick. We'll go to Director Soon.
Thank you, Director Saragosa, and great words from you, and as well as Chair Jennings as well. It'll be. I'm excited to get implement this plan. I think it was Director Saragosa mentioned there was a lot of work that we did just to develop the charter, and we had a lot of great input from our nonprofits and our community representatives, and I think that made all the difference in the world. For me, just real quick, born and raised in Sacramento. My dad's side immigrated here through Cortland, through Angel Island in the 1920s. So we've been in the Sacramento area quite a long time. My mom, I'm a son of an immigrant. My mom came from Hong Kong in the late 60s. And so I've got an appreciation of both sides, whether I'm first generation on one side and maybe third on the other. So and then it's funny because my wife is also born in Hong Kong, so my kids don't get to gain any any advantage. I reset the clock, but anyway, civil engineer, worked in land use and transportation, and now water resources. I know many of you from the flood side. Especially talked with Carm about that a lot, and Director Jennings as well. And that's it. That's all about me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Darren. Director Vang.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I believe I'm here as a new member, but not part of the work group. So just wanted to share that. I was just interested to learn more about the work that y'all have been doing. I'm really excited to be part of SACOG and really to be serving alongside Coach. I call him a coach on the city council. I know he's been leading a lot of this work at SACOG, but just really grateful to all of you and James, you and your staff as well, making this really a priority and working on this for the past 2 years. I think all of you know the decisions we make every single day impact the economic and social outcomes of all of our residents. And I represent South Sacramento, everything south of Florin, all the way to the very tip of the city before it becomes Elk Grove. I was born and raised here in South Sacramento. My parents are Hmong. Mom and dad came here as refugees, not speaking English. And there's 16 of us. I'm the oldest of 16 kids in my family. First in my family to go to college, and then came back here to help mom and dad in our community, and now serving on the Sacramento City Council, and just grateful every day to have this opportunity to do what I can to make neighborhoods and our region better. And so just really honored to serve alongside all of you and to learn more about this action plan and providing support I can to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Director Vang. We'll go to Director Schaefer.
Well, thank you. I'm brand new to SACOG, so I don't really know much about this. I will share with you some of the details of how I grew up. So my folks divorced when I was 4 years old. My mom having 5 kids and very little child support. We lived primarily on AFDC. Lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood and started a community. Unfortunately, there was a lot of crime there, but when I was old enough, I decided to go live with my dad down in Santa Cruz. That's where I graduated high school. I was actually born in Santa Cruz, but I learned a lot about the diversity and different people. And in Santa Cruz, there's a very small percentage of minorities. It's primarily, at least when I was growing up, primarily Caucasian folks down there. So I just learned to recognize many of the kids that I grew up with are in jail or dead. And I just looked at that and said, that's not like me. And, I worked hard. I'm Site City Council, currently serving as mayor. And it's a little bit about my city. We're certainly going through a little bit of a renaissance with how we're approaching some of the issues that we've had in the city. I'm very proud of the current council and how we've moved forward. Look forward to learning more about the racial equity and inclusion that you folks have put together, and all ears.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Director Desmond.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for letting me join you. I'm very. Is my video freezing up?
No, you're good.
You're good.
I'm okay.
You're good.
Okay, it froze up on my screen. Very happy to be a part of this working group. A little bit about me. I'm a 5th generation Sacramento County kid, born and raised in Carmichael. Youngest of 9 kids. Actually live in the house where I grew up. So a very, very deep, broad and very deep connections to the community. And my district in Sacramento County, about 315,000 people, and about 95% of my district is urban unincorporated. And the reason why that is so important is that these are communities that have really suffered from a lack of good municipal governance. And these are communities in Arden Arcade, Carmichael, Foothill Farms, Fair Oaks, and now Gold River. I just took in part of that. I still have part of North Highlands. And I think what you see in this district I represent is some of the wealthiest and the poorest in Sacramento County, and also extremely, extremely diverse. And a lot of suffering and a lot of need in these unincorporated communities that I think in large part because they're unincorporated, have not had the amount of engagement and investment and inclusivity in terms of county land use planning, transportation planning. Two of the communities I represent are environmental justice communities. I know Councilmember Vang has very large environmental justice communities in her district she represents as well. And you see the need there and how big it is. So for me, being a part of this work group, I really hope to, on the micro level, certainly look to how we can implement this action plan, certainly in the districts I represent, to make sure they have more opportunities, and whether that's more home ownership, like Michael talks about, better transportation options, but certainly on the macro level, being part of SACOG, how do we improve those conditions for everybody who needs it throughout this region? So I'm just very, very excited and honored to be a part of this with all of you. Thank you.
Director
right.
Desmond and Director Saragosa, if I might, just because Director Vang said this, so this is just a general board member introduction refresher. We're happy to have all of you. Some of you are going to be serving on this year's Race Equity Inclusion Working Group. Some of you are just going to be on the board, not on the working group, but you're going to be hearing report backs on the board, right? So this is not the kickoff per se, just for the working group. Some of you are on it. We're excited about that. All of you will hear about it. So I just wanted to make sure a level set, like you're in the right place. Okay.
No, and thank you, James, for that. I appreciate that for the clarification. That is correct.
Although I think I'm on the work group, right, James?
You are in the work group.
Okay, all
Yes,
right.
you are.
Make sure I didn't
You
miss.
are. No, I know, like-
Yeah, and I don't think I am, but I'm honored to be part of the orientation to
Thanks.
learn about the work. So
Yeah, yeah.
great.
No, you're a two for Rick. Great. All right, Director Frost. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm delighted to be here. I was on, I think, the first year initial group, but I'm not on the working group this year. Am I correct,
That's right.
James? But I'm excited to welcome all the new people to SACOG, and I wanted to be here today just to kind of get an update on the same update you're getting, to just bring me up to speed on everything that's happened in the last couple years. I was an immigrant. My original family immigrated from Germany to Denmark and over to the United States. And one of my ancestors was part of the American Revolution, Frederick Overmyer. And I come from my mom was an orphan, single parent. I was raised in probably a lower income home in my young years. I have a very diverse family. I have Black people, Singaporean, Indian, Hispanic blood relatives, and we all come together very well over time and love each other deeply. And I was, in the initial year of this group, the one member who was concerned that I wanted to have us keep in mind 3 words: equality and the law. That was important to me. And so I will look forward to, I know this is important work, and I will look forward to seeing what the work group comes together to achieve this year. And I want to thank Rick Jennings for your leadership. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sue. And Director Neasley. And if I pronounce that wrong, Jenny, please correct me.
It's Nicely.
Nicely, okay, I apologize.
I'm new to the SACOG, and I'm just here to get this presentation and see what it's all about. Just quickly about me, I have small business. I also am executive director of the senior center, so senior housing is kind of important to me. And so I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Director Burris.
Sorry, I had a little trouble coming off mute there. Yeah, so just a little bit about me. This is my second year on SACOG. I am the mayor of Colfax. again this year, since my second year in that position. I actually grew up in Orangeville, Sacramento County, and then I went through foster care as the oldest of 6 through Sacramento. And yeah, you know, that's pretty much my main background. My grandparents came over from the Philippines in the 1920s. And that's really the closest family that I have is my cousins and everybody that are over there. So I really enjoy the rural areas. And so that's part of why I moved up to Colfax, because back in the time that I was a child, Orangeville was extremely rural. So that's been very enjoyable for me. And I just really appreciate Zaragoza's comments regarding homeownership, because that really, truly, from my experience, has been one of the most difficult hurdles that can make one of the biggest difference in someone's trajectory. So.
All right. Thank you, Trinity. And did I hit her? Did I get everybody there, James?
Director Lauren, Jesse Lauren.
All right. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lauren.
Sorry, I had my camera off. I'm not feeling too well, but I'm so honored to be here. And many of the comments that have been made are touchstones of my life also. So I agree. I want to support having housing available to all people to build wealth. I think housing, home ownership is extremely important. I'm Mexican American. My dad my experience growing up with a Mexican father and an Irish mother, kind of like Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, if you will. He was a musician, but going out with my father gave me one set of experiences, and going out with my mother, a completely other one. And I've spent my whole life negotiating, you know, those avenues. And I'm the youngest of 11. I grew up in Southern California, and then really embraced living in rural, winters. And I've been on council. This is my 7th year, but I spent a lot of the last 6 years with League of California Cities, and I worked with their DEI, working their ad hoc committee, and really carried the torch of rural cities to make sure that we were represented with the League of Cities, or Cal Cities. But also I really deeply understand the intersectionality and have experienced the intersectionality of race, gender, poverty. And I'm so glad to just be part of this and to carry on the work that is really like the whole reason why I'm in government. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jesse. And thank you, everybody. I just, I wanted everybody just to, some of us know each other, some of us don't, some of us will all get to know each other better as we go forward here, but just so everyone has a sense of where we're coming from on this and as we move forward. So thank you, everyone, for giving that, just those brief introductions. And with that, I'm going to now hand it back over to James and Casey to kind of just walk us through our refresher or a primer for those that are new.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Director Zaragoza. It's really just great, I have to say, to hear a little bit more about all of you and your stories and your experience and the reasons you represent your communities and your passion. And so this, in some ways, Director Frost mentioned, we sort of began this work in 2020. We began it after the murder of George Floyd. We began it not in a, all on the same page whatsoever. I've been here now almost 6 years. We started to try to have conversations about race, racial disparities, and racial injustice. My first couple of years here serving SACOG, and it was hard. And, it was very uncomfortable, and we couldn't figure out a way in many ways. We couldn't open the right door, I felt like, for a 31-member board. And I want to give a lot of credit for the board members that have served on the REI working group the last few years, because I think that door is now open. And I think that for all of us, no matter where you're from and your background and your story, race, racial disparities, racial inequities is like a language, and we kind of have to learn a little bit of the language. And it's awkward when you start speaking a language you haven't spoken, or maybe you knew it in childhood, but you've forgotten it. So this is the first time we've really kind of told our origin story about race, equity, inclusion work at SACOG. It is a very imperfect, small step journey, but it is one that I am absolutely convinced is vital to the success of the region. We just crossed over in the US Census in 2020, across the 6 counties, we're now majority people of color. And those thresholds, when you cross those thresholds, demographically, I think it is this milestone, and it's kind of a turning point. And so I think a lot from my take on this and my perspective. We're gonna go into slides. Poll. Okay. So look, all right, we're gonna do a few things. I know some of you may be, having lunch or have your cameras off, but if we can, because we just kind of want to do a little bit of a very quick fire rapid poll. These are easy questions, I promise you, for the most part. So can we put the first poll question up? And if you're able to, there you go. Pretty easy. New or returning board member.
And as you're answering this very difficult question, we have these questions here in part because this primer session today is actually, it's the first action out of our racial equity action plan that we are kicking off this year. And so there are a few things that we want to just make sure that we're measuring and monitoring so that we can see how we do. So in addition to these polls and the conversation here, we will be looking forward to your feedback as we go along on how we can make this more effective for the next time we do it. So look at that.
Look at that.
Yep.
All right.
All right, 50-50, that's awesome.
Okay, are we one more quick poll question? I'm gonna throw that one up. Okay.
You can pick more than one here if it's relevant. I don't know how to make that go.
All right.
Okay.
All members vote who desire to vote. Okay, are we good?
We have about 40% participation. Do you want me to hold it up for a little bit longer for those who haven't answered yet?
Okay, good. I think we're, if you can vote, great. I'm actually pausing to hold it open. There you go. All right.
Great. So about half of everyone's familiar with it. Needs a refresher. Those are probably our returning members. And then a smattering of, you heard about it at the January meeting or when SACOG came to visit your counselor board, and some who are very familiar with it and here to share with your colleagues. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Thanks, Renee. Okay, now we are jumping into the slides.
Now we're in the slides. Casey and I may shorten this. We were going to do a little tag team here. So let's kind of keep going into let's go to the next slide. Yeah, and I too think it was really important for Director Saragosa, thank you for having everybody kind of share a little bit about themselves. I think that was really important. So understand if we jump through some of these slides, we're just trying to manage time. I think you all heard about this in the board meeting to kick off the year, January 19th. We have a new strategic plan as an agency, and that strategic plan has a mission statement and a vision statement that references the mission, referencing the 3 E's, basically equity, economy, and environment. And that triple bottom line set of goals, I think, is really important. It is not that we are trying to trade off one for the other, or one is more important than the other. We are literally trying to maximize in everything we do, equitable outcomes, prosperity for everybody, and a sustainable, clean environment, that we are mitigating our carbon emissions and also thinking about adaptation. So that triple bottom line, we believe, is a really important framework and that is new for us too. And just to be very clear with some of our new board members. So we are trying to practice a lot of these things and understand we are still working all those things out and trying to apply the strategic plan and our new goals and our new mission every day. This is yours.
Sure thing. So James has already touched on sort of how we started here. It was really in 2020. It was after the murder of George Floyd. It was an acknowledgement on the SACOG board that racial inequities and racial injustice exist. And so a first version of the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group was started in 2020. And that was originally just comprised of SACOG board members. The question on the table was, what should SACOG do to advance racial equity? There were a couple of, that was very, as James, I think, said it very well, it was a struggle to figure out what's the language, how do we enter into this conversation. There were a couple of things that came out of that that we are now making some progress with. One big thing, it's the slide in front of you, was that the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group recommended to the full board that in the regional funding program, that's the funding round, that is the competitive program, that there be a new program carved out with some of that money to fund equitable community engagement in communities. So this is the Engage, Empower, Implement program, which you will hear much more about over this next year. But that's really the goal with that is to start, it's a pilot to start to reverse the trend of government planning for communities, planning at them without really engaging, to shift that into planning with communities, and particularly focusing on communities that have been historically harmed by government planning and infrastructure and investment, or just completely left out entirely. So that's what this is, and we look forward to developing that with you over the next year. Next slide, please. The other thing that working group wanted to do is to establish a baseline of just where are we at. And so a consultant was commissioned to do a racial equity audit on SACOG. What it said was that SACOG is not an equitable government agency. That's no surprise. That is just the state of our communities. And so this really kind of opened the door to needing to investigate, okay, what do we have to do differently? Next slide, please. The other thing that came out of that working group was wanting to understand more, just some more about the demographics of our region, like where are these inequities? And so it was our first attempt to really try to focus on some baseline indicators across the region, as we do in our regional progress report. We added in what we could from census data to try to show some of the disparities that I think we know to be true from people's experiences, and this is sort of laying it out in the data here. And so a few things I want to hit on. One is that educational attainment illustrates the racial disparities in our region. You can see from this slide that Black and Hispanic persons are disproportionate in not having the same level of educational attainment across the region and compared to their white and Asian counterparts. Next slide, please. And then also we see that there's a disparity in median annual household income by race and ethnicity. So you see some similar trends here. Again, this is, this makes some sense, right? If you don't see the same educational attainment, we know that educational attainment is tied to income. So you can start to see there's some structural inequities here. Next slide, please. And then the last one I want to highlight on is housing cost burden by race and ethnicity. So there are those disparities in income are reflected in housing cost burden. And this is it's a unique sort of indicator, but what it's saying is these are households that are paying over 30% of their monthly income on housing. So that means that your cost burden, if you're paying more than 50% of your income on housing, then you are severely cost burdened. And so you can see, again, the disparities really are the same types of disparities. They're mirroring the slides that we saw previously.
Can we hold this slide actually just for a second? Because do you have more of these, or
No,
so just to hold on this one, because I think this is important. And again, for the newer board members, we try as an agency to be very data driven and use a lot of quantitative research, analytics, and but also back to triple bottom line. 4 years ago, we brought out the Brookings Institution. We partnered with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, Metro Chamber, the Asian Chamber, Valley Vision, and the Brookings Institution out of DC that does a lot of analysis on regional economies and economies of the future. basically did what I would call a stress test. So I'm going to use this analogy. Okay. So we had them come out and we said, okay, give us a stress test, an economic stress test of our 6-county economy. And they spent a lot of time here and they came back with the following baseline, very rough summary. Number one, your economy is too reliant on government, right? You're the state capital. That is not your future. And boy, has COVID proven that to be true, right? Loss of state jobs or remote working and everything else. Number two, by the way, too many levels of government, layers of government, special districts, JPAs. That was interesting, resonated with a number of board members. Number three, and not by this slide, but if you look back at our kind of economic outcomes, if you will, kind of GDP, employment, we were looking pretty good in the teens. Brookings Institution came in with a stress test and said, hey, Sacramento region, you may look good on the outside, your numbers are going up, but underlying, you have a serious chronic health condition, economic condition, and that is racial disparities and racial inequities. And if you don't fix the fact that that there are huge disparities in your region, just economically, you're going to have a very bad future. Your outcomes are going to get worse. This problem is going to come home to roost sooner rather than later. They were very clear about this fact, that we're one of the most diverse regions in the nation, and we have some of the most serious disparities. So I think that was, even for a lot of our economic folks, and it was a real, for me anyway, it was a wake-up call to do that in partnership with some of our economic groups as well. So next slide.
Real fast.
Yeah.
I saw that Director Vang had her hand up for a second. I
Oh.
wanted to see before we went too far along.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Really appreciate the data on the housing burden and on the educational attainment, and just was curious to see if there were conversation or examination at looking at disaggregated data, especially for the Asian American community, just given how diverse it is. I know that when you're able to disaggregate data, especially among Asian Americans, Pacific Islander, you'll see kind of exposed hidden trends that will identify kind of some of the vulnerable population that often are overlooked, because when you clump Asian Americans together, it seems like they're doing well. But when you actually disaggregate the data, you'll see subgroups like Hmong, Mien, and Lao in terms of educational attainment and whatnot. And we just wanted to know if that would have been part of the conversation or if that data was taken into consideration.
Thank you so much for raising that. It's important. It actually has come up in the presentation of this, and it is difficult to disaggregate the data to get to breaking it down in that way across the region. However, our data team had tried very hard to be able to do that. But I think just even your comment, I think, is very helpful to acknowledge that if you dive into that, and I think it would be the same for any of the other racial and ethnic groups, that you would start to see those disparities there. So we don't have that right now to share. We acknowledge it, and I appreciate that you raise it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Mai.
Yeah,
Thank you for the response as well.
Okay, so after going through this year, getting to this point, SACOG was at a point that said, okay, we have some sense of what our challenges are ahead of us. What are we going to do about it? Our board leadership decided to continue the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group, this time saying, let's bring in some people who have experience and expertise in racial equity and justice. And so that was the formation of the next version of the working group. So on the slide, you see the SACOG board members who raised their hand to do this. And going to the next slide, we had 10 additional members who volunteered. They volunteered in the same way as our board members, meaning they got a stipend. It wasn't nearly enough for the time that they shared with us, but people who had expertise in this work, lived experience, or it was their life's work. They were valuable contributors with our SACOG board members. They were charged with 3 things over 2 years. 1, to develop a racial equity statement of change and commitment that would be presented to the SACOG board to adopt. 2, to advise us on how to embed racial equity into the update of our long-range plan, the blueprint, because that plan really sets the policies and priorities and programs that SACOG conducts on an annual basis. And so to try to start with racial equity built into that update, we thought was an important thing to try to do. And then third, to develop and champion a racial equity action plan for SACOG, which you've heard that the SACOG board adopted, which was at the end of 2022. So this working group accomplished all three things. Next slide, please. I want to put this up because so our chair of the working group was Director Jennings, and he kicked off that very first meeting of the working group with 10 board members and 10 public members with saying, we are building a house. And so he wanted to know what success looks like to each of the members. And so I want to share this, this image because I think it just shares, if you read through the words, it shows you the hope and the promise that if we can stick with this and work together, there is so much to look forward to along the way, as well as and getting to that end state. Next slide, please.
Okay, I've got this one. And by the way, that was quite the foundation you built, Rick. So still supporting all the rest of this work today. The working group had a lot of presenters that came in. So one of the things I would say was a real, we're going to continue to replicate the working group. Casey mentioned 10 board members, 10 external members, that kind of mix. And some of you were on the working group and Rick chaired it, but we think was incredibly productive and led to lots of great conversations, as did folks like Charles Brown, who came and talked about the role of transportation and planning and government policy, and honestly, the ugly side of this. And when we think about history and we think about government's role in dividing people by class, by race, and I learned this myself. I became a transportation planner. I was so curious about where the interstate highways came from. And early on in my career and my studies on these topics, I could not believe that the many interstates in many cities were actually used to divide Black and white communities intentionally, placed there absolutely intentionally. The history of our region, which is something we would like to dig into more with the board going forward in this year, obviously is of great interest to us. Maybe doesn't have quite the clearest things, but you know, I-5, actually US 50, even the 505, and I know Director Lauren knows the story well, has actually now cut off a very low-income community from the rest of Winters. And so government policy in transportation, in housing, there's so much with Charles Brown's research that I could go into. And also how it manifests itself today. So I was just writing my executive director update and talking a little bit about these Safe Streets for All grants that West Sacramento and Yuba Sutter have now won. Well, in part, those grants are intended to try to do better around the racial disparities and the income disparities that show up in things like traffic fatalities and pedestrian fatalities, and the fact that we have lots of high-speed streets in the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable, where people walk the most. And so people who are low income and of color show up disproportionately in traffic fatalities. And so Charles Brown's admonition to all of us is plan with communities, not for them. And that's what Casey was referencing earlier in terms of the EEI program. So next slide. Director Jennings got the board together last year and did a book club, and this was the book he challenged all to read, Some of Us by Heather McGhee. We had a former SAC-B writer, editorial writer, Ginger Rutland, actually facilitate that, all online over Zoom, and it was fantastic. And the bottom line of the Some of Us, which I think is incredibly powerful, is if we think of race and racial inequities as a zero-sum game, we will never move beyond that. If it is taking away from one group to give to another, which I know is everybody's, boy, that better not, and her point is has to be the sum of us. And the one of the chapters she talks about and writes about is when swimming pools in the 1950s desegregated public pools across the United States, many communities closed them rather than integrate them, right? So we have a public good that is actually taken away rather than what could be a synergistic impact of actually sharing the public good among many. So I think a very powerful, but that zero sum is a very, it is a, I understand, constant tension, alive and well, and it shows up all over the place. And I understand as one of the many reasons this is a very hard topic to tackle because people fear loss more than sort of the promise of gain. Okay, next slide. Very, very happy. And again, this is really about the credit to our board and the working group. We were able to win an award last year. WTS, Women's Transportation Seminar, awarded the work of the working group and all 20 members with the Rosa Parks Award. Really, I think just for the courage, the bravery that the board took to step out and make the statement, adopt the statement of racial equity, change and commitment, and work on the racial equity action plan. Next slide. And in terms of awards, I want to go from the nice awards that sit on the shelf to the really nice awards that come to our communities. My point here is that almost every single grant program that we want to win, that your communities want to win for transportation and housing, is asking us, what are you doing for equity, to reduce racial disparities and community engagement? And this is just the sample verbiage from the federal RAISE program, which is a big grant program we're all trying to win, right? So meaningful engagement with residents to ensure equity considerations for underserved communities throughout the life cycle of the project. This is not a checkbox exercise. If we check this and just say, yep, sure, fine, we're good, we will not win funding. We will not be competitive. So I don't want to check the box, right? We want to have a place in a region and projects that have equity and community engagement at the forefront, and that are really shaped and driven by the communities that we say we want to have benefit from these investments. And believe me, increasingly, we are going to be scrutinized and asked this question. And the more that we have genuine answers, understanding that we're still on the beginning of a journey as a region, the more successful we will be. My answer to the zero-sum game is, if we're good at this, there is much to gain from, including actually being competitive for some of our transportation and housing grants. Next slide.
All right, I want to pause here on the racial equity statement of change and commitment that James mentioned that the SACOG board did adopt. It both acknowledged that residents living in the 6-county region face significant inequities, resulting in disparities and divides that exist by race and ethnicity, by income, and by urban and rural areas. It also committed SACOG to tackling inequities and disparities in all forms, and leading with racial equity to work towards a thriving economy and healthy environment for all residents of the Sacramento region. So, and set forth a vision that the Sacramento region be a place where race is no longer a predictor of life outcomes, and outcomes for all groups are improved. Now, the statement was a statement of change and commitment, and on the screen in front of you are the commitments that were baked into that. So what SACOG committed to do is to listen and learn, to create a plan, to support our member and partner agencies as well, to take action and to measure that action. And once that statement was adopted, SACOG, the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group then took the year of 2022 to develop the Racial Equity Action Plan. We started with listening and learning. And so with the help of an equity consultant, we both interviewed each of the REI working group members individually, as well as held listening sessions with our stakeholders, public and nonprofit from across the region that we work with regularly, to really ask, okay, here's the statement that SACOG wants to change, that SACOG wants to reduce racial disparities. What can we do as a government agency, as a metropolitan planning organization to accomplish that? The main thing that we heard, I think overarching, is that government in general and SACOG in its own work needs to work more intentionally to reach and meaningfully engage underrepresented communities, and their real interest in seeing that the Racial Equity Action Plan is part of SACOG's triple bottom line approach to its work. So that first part has started. The reason for the emphasis on engagement is because, again, by planning with communities then can weigh in on how we prioritize policy, investment, how we shape policy. And so there's a lot of that emphasis there. Next slide, please. Recognizing the time, I want to, the slides I'm going through are all the goals in the action plan. And what we will do is after this meeting, we will share the electronic copy of the action plan with all of you so that you can see the statements, so that you can see all of the goals. And there's also background there as well, if you'd like to see it. What I want to touch on, though, this is kind of the meat of the year, is that that action plan, we are starting in on implementation of it. It's what the Race Equity Inclusion Group is going to be overseeing. And to just touch on each of the three areas of focus, one is on operations, and that's really just to focus on who works here, to cast a wider net for new hires, not diluting the quality of the applications, but really trying to make sure that anyone who's eligible really can apply and be part of this work. And then that who we work with, that third goal is about who we contract with when it comes to vendors and consultants, that we're casting a wider net there and trying a wider net and lowering barriers. Next slide, please. On the program side of things, we are looking at increasing engagement across the region, particularly with the groups that are listed here on this screen, and meaningful engagement to help shape our projects and programs. Next slide, please. And with that engagement, to increase the funding ultimately for programs and projects that prioritize underrepresented and underserved communities. We want to, the third goal points to that along the way, we have members who are governments, we work with many government partners, and so we want to support and learn from them along the way. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over to James to find out your part specifically.
We're almost done, and we have one last poll. I know we want to get you out of here soon, so stand by for the poll. All right, last piece of this is board practice. And what we have committed to through the Racial Equity Action Plan is the board deepening its understanding of how race, ethnicity, income, rural, urban affects the outcomes of every community in the region. And that is the reason, by the way, that we want to, in a small way, start to go offsite for board meetings, start to rotate around the region, have workshops where we hear about those communities and the challenges and struggles they have. We also want to do one tour this year. We often go to different cities around the country just for the SACOG board. We're doing our tour inside the region this year. So that's another way that we're going to try and do this. Bringing triple bottom line decisions and trying to spell out the racial equity impacts of what's in front of you as a board, and really maintaining that consistent engagement on the action plan. The REI working group will be overseeing the implementation of the action plan. The full board will get the updates. So next slide. There's the action plan. I think we're kind of done here, and I would just say that a lot of work went into this. I think you can probably tell we are really trying to stay true to our word and actually take steps and hold ourselves accountable. The work of the board members and our public members last year, I'm really proud of it. These are small steps. We try to do this with humility. But we're going to keep working on this, and we're going to keep it in front of you. And I ask that you roll your sleeves up, that you engage, that you be ready for sometimes having hard conversations, and you understand what's on the other end, if we are successful, is a brighter future for every single person in the region. And you all are the leaders to make that happen. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, James. Thank you, Casey. I think I know we're at time. Does anybody have a question? If y'all don't mind staying a couple of more minutes. All right, seeing none. And just to echo what James said, for everyone to have grace for each other and for staff as we move through this, we don't have the full plan yet, or how this is going to work, and there'll be mistakes and there'll be victories, but just to have grace for each other, for different points of view, and and for having these really hard discussions. So I just want to again thank everybody that are part of the committee, and for those that wanted the refresher or just wanted more information, much more to come. And I'm just really proud of everybody and for the work we're doing as we move forward here. So with that, then I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
Hey, Michael, can we
Yes.
just, I'm sorry to make you do this, but it's just good practice for us if we could do the poll questions unless Director Desmond.
Oh yeah, I
unless
forgot
Director
about the
Desmond has a
already.
question. He just came off mute.
No, I was just going to say goodbye. So no, I'm ready for the poll question.
All right, please. I know if you can, we'd appreciate this. And you can also follow up with myself or Casey, right? At any point on this, I'm sure if you're new, hopefully you have a lot of questions, right? And that would be completely understandable. So, we're just trying to be a little in a small way, data driven, and get you some feedback. And but happy as always, anytime to talk to you more in depth about this and tell you a little bit about the journey we're on. I think depending on how that is, we have one more.
We might have one more. Yes.
Yeah,
Renee,
I would encourage everybody to check in with either us that have been on the committee or with staff if you have questions. We certainly will give you our thoughts as well.
We have one more. Okay, there's the answer.
Okay, great. So understanding their economic and health inequities and disparities by race, some needing more information to prove their racial inequities and disparities, some who understand that there are those inequities but don't see them in their community, and then and many who say they understand those inequities and disparities exist in the region and in your community. Thank you so much for that. And I believe we have one more question.
We have one more, Renee.
We do have two more questions. I can just internet one if we want time, but I just wanted to announce that real quick. I'm launching the second to last one right now.
This is actually a good one. This will actually help staff a lot as we prepare for the board and REI working group meetings. So if you could weigh in on this one, we'd appreciate it.
Next.
Yeah, go ahead. All right.
Great.
2020-60. I like it.
Yes.
Nice even numbers.
Yes. Okay. All
Thank you for
right.
doing
Thank
this.
you.
One last one, Renee. All right.
Oh,
Last one.
This might take a minute.
This will actually be very useful to
Yeah.
what we agendize.
Yeah, so if you can, and you can do multiple here, right?
Yes.
You can do more than one. Maybe we should do this for the full board as well.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we appreciate it because it's just good feedback for us.
Oh, where to go?
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
All right.
Best practices on what I as a local elected official can do to take action. We got that across the board. And then a lot of other good feedback. This is great. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Yep.
Okay,
More data, more examples. Okay.
great.
Thank you all. Thanks for being here and your time and your leadership, past, present, and future.
All right. Good afternoon,
Thank you,
everybody.
James and Casey.
You all.
Thank you.